I'm pulling off my main project to make a little shelf. This is going to be a live edge shelf. I'm going to cut the back edge square because it'll be a wall shelf. Have 3 pieces. They'll be spaced roughly 10 inches apart, and we're going to have about roughly 25 inches of width and about 5.5 inches of depth. This will be good for paperback books, DVDs, if anybody still has DVDs. This project kind of goes along with the other one that I'm building, but I'm going to go ahead and get this done because I can get it done quick and get the video out instead of waiting another week or so to get the main project ready. I figure the easiest way to square up the back edge of these planks is to use the log milling sled on the bandsaw. I'm going to square up the ends of my boards and then cut them all to length. Being live edge, the widths of my planks vary. These will be the side pieces of the shelf, and what I'm going to do is put 3 cross braces in this. The widest part of any shelf is 5 5/8. Double check that. Yeah, 5 5/8. So I'm spacing the side pieces 5 5/8 apart. So I'll cut 6 cross braces, and I'm going to join them with mortise and loose tenon joints. Got my mortising table set up to mortise the stiles. In order to make sure I reference off the same face, I'm cutting, starting at the bottom on 2 of the stiles, and then the other 2 I'll be starting at the top. I've got this set up where I can push past my fence. I've got a fence clamped down behind the stile to keep it aligned. When I mortise the rails, I'll just have to mortise one end and then spin it flat to mortise the other end. That way I'll be referencing off the same face of it, and hopefully everything will align well by doing that. I've got it, the bit set up as close to center as possible, but there's no way to guarantee it's exactly centered, so if I was referencing off two different faces, then we may wind up with the rails and stiles being offset slightly. Got stop blocks set up in the saw head, so it will only move as far as the mortise is wide, and I've got it set to where I'm going 5/8 of an inch deep into the stiles and the rails. That's half the width of the stile. I'm using a solid carbide spiral down cut. I've got these stiles marked, and I'm aligning the mark with the fence. So that's all the rails mortised, and all the two mortises and the stiles. I've got to reposition my mortising table to give me more clearance back at the wall, so I'm not hitting my conduit on this last cut. Just 2 more inches. If I had 2 more inches, everything would work. Of course, I didn't actually have to reposition the table. I just needed to bring the cutter head out farther so I could get this board farther from the wall. I'm glad I realized that before I did something ridiculous like taking the table loose and bringing it out and finding some blocks that were just the right size to shim it out. Alright, here we go. Alright, one down, one more to go. Got all my tenons cut. I just ripped down a piece of stock to the right thickness and width, and then rounded it over on the router table. Got this piece just dry fit, and the tenons fit pretty tight. I checked that everything's good and square. Got a slight change in design. Originally I was planning to notch the shelves and put them on top of the supports. I've decided I don't want the end grain showing, and also doing it that way would require coming in through the bottom of these supports with screws, which is going to be pretty awkward. So I'm going to flat butt each shelf at the bottom of the support pieces and just put screws in from the outside. I'm going to cut square walnut buttons to cover the screw heads. The companion piece to this shelf is going to have walnut accents, so I figured it made sense to use them on the shelf there's really no place else to put any accents if I don't just do buttons. So at any rate, I'm going to get this thing back apart and glue it up. Alright, looking pretty good. Now, set this one aside and do the other one. Set the shelf down on the floor to make it easier to drill. I've got my screw holes marked and center punched. Alright, 1 down, 11 to go. Well, here it is assembled. It's looking pretty good. Still got work to do on it. Got to sand it. I need to make all the walnut plugs to cover the screw holes and put a finish on it. I'll bring the camera over and show you what I've got in mind for plugging these holes. Rather than put a square plug just straight over the hole, I'm going to do a rectangular plug that'll give me an even amount on the bottom and the top. I think it would look weird if I just put a square plug in and had it so far off center. So I'm getting ready to disassemble this thing and mortise out for all the walnut plugs. Making progress on the mortises. Got 4 done and I've got 8 to go. Got all the mortises cut. About halfway through this, I started wishing I had set up a file and cut these on the CNC. Would have been fairly simple. I mean, just set up a file with 2 and then stepped it into each position, since they're all supposed to be identical. But anyway, it's done. Got this little piece of walnut stock that I'm going to cut the screw plugs out of. This is a 1/2 inch thick, and my screw plugs will need to be 3/8 of an inch. It'll be 3/8 by 1/4, so I'm going to cut 1/4 inch strips out of this, and then I'll have to slightly taper each one, so that'll be interesting. Not sure if I'm going to do that on the table saw or the sander or what. I made a bunch of test cuts and I finally hit on an angle that'll work for my screw hole plugs. I'm using 6 degrees. You probably can't tell it, but the top is beveled all the way around. Beveled, chamfered, whatever you want to call it. I made a new zero clearance insert that I could use with the blade being angled. It's a little too tall for the table. I'm not worried about that because the pieces are so short they're going to be almost fully on the insert. I don't have it attached down, I've just got the fence holding it, but I made quite a few test cuts with it, so it's fine. I'll head over to the bandsaw and cut these to length. I clamped a stop to my miter gauge so I can just butt these little short pieces up against it and it'll give me the correct length. Still kind of a trick to hold it because it's so short. But I believe this will work. Can't get the camera in a very good position to show this. I've got my sander table set up at the angle I need to cut on the end of the little buttons that'll cover the screw heads. I clamped my miter gauge in place to act as a fence so I can just butt these up against it and push them into the sanding disc. Alright, there's the first one. I'm going to go test it and see how it fits. So the first button is a good fit. I'm going to do all the rest of them the same way. I'm just barreling down to the length of the top part, and that's where I'm stopping. So if I hit all of them right, then we should be good. The buttons are all made. I came out with 4 extras. I'll be sending those along with the shelf on the off chance that I sell it. That way, if the buyer loses some, there'll be some extras. They're all the same size and interchangeable in the mortises, so there's no need to worry about matching one specific button to one specific mortise. Last one. Alright, not too shabby. Decided how I'm going to hang this shelf. Picked up this bracket. I'm going to cut it so it'll be the same type of bracket you'd use on a floating shelf. Got my mounting bracket marked where I need to cut it. Alright, the first cut went pretty well right to the end when I let the saw drop and put a nice gash in my workbench. I'm going to throw my board down before I do the rest of them so I won't have 4 gashes in it. At least it didn't get the bench. Okay, I got the mortising table on the RAS set up to do horizontal boring. This will be the hole for the mounting bracket rod to fit into. The rod is 25/64, and I'm using a 25/64 bit because the RAS has a little bit of run out in it, and using the same size bit actually gives me a slightly larger hole, just big enough for this to comfortably slide into. I've got my depth stop set to keep the bit from drilling all the way through. Couldn't do this on my drill press because there's not enough room to get this piece standing up in there and still get the drill bit into the chuck. I got both mortises cut and the brackets fitting flush. Using a 1/2 inch Forstner bit for the screw head recesses. I want to have a little bit of play in there. I drilled the holes in the brackets slightly oversized, so if there's any misalignment when brackets get hung on the wall, we'll have a little bit of play. Okay, I'm just finishing up putting the chamfer around the top edge of the side supports. Using a little sanding stick with some sandpaper glued to it. Makes this a lot easier and more precise than just doing it by hand with a piece of paper or a beading block. I learned that trick from David Marks. I eased over all the edges with some 220 just to keep them from being sharp. And I'm getting ready to apply the first coat of tunnel oil. Well, there it is. Once this coat of tunnel oil is dry, I will come back and give it another coat. I don't think the color will change much. By adding another coat, it'll bring the sheen up a little bit. Now, bear in mind those plugs are just barely stuck in there. Once they're tapped in with a mallet, they'll go a good bit deeper.